All right, I will call to order this February 7th Town Council work session. Thank you all for being here, and for those who are tuned in online. Ms. McKay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Amos,
Here.
Mr. Reed,
Here.
Mr. Dwyer,
Here.
Mr. Parrott,
Here.
Mr. Yolen, Mr. Hunter,
Here.
Mr. Hardy.
Here.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Declaration of personal interest. Do we have anyone who wishes to make a declaration of personal interest concerning the items on the agenda today? Not hearing any. We will move to the next item, which is the finance report. Ms. Julie Moore will give us the monthly financial report. Hello.
Good evening. You guys have the December charts and reports in front of you, and that means we're halfway through the fiscal year 24 budget. So when you look at the revenue to budget, we're almost at the 50% mark, but that is because we got the ABM funding in, and that's been recorded as revenue. And next week we're coming to you and asking you to record the budget side. So if you excluded that amount, we would be slightly below. But as I've stated in the past, that's because we haven't received like business licenses and other taxes that lag behind. So we're still doing pretty good. But the water and sewer fund are below the budget amounts, and that's because, again, we budgeted ARPA money and we have not recorded that revenue, and we won't till the end of the year. That's because we want to see how much we spend so then we can record that revenue. And then the transportation fund is below budget, and that's because we budgeted for some buses and we haven't gotten those reimbursements yet. But we did get the reimbursements either at the end of January or the 1st of February, so you'll see that the next couple of months where we got that money in. When you look at revenue compared to prior year, we're up, and that's again because of the ABM revenue that we recorded. For expenses, we're well below the 50% mark of the budget, so that's always a positive. But there's still a couple of departments that are over budget, and we talked about those last month, and that's the finance department and the library. But I promise at the end of the year they will not be over budget. And then the expenses compared to prior year, we are below that. But again, there's a few departments that are over when you compare, and that's the finance department because we purchased that OpenGov software, the recreation department because of the splash pad, and then the water fund has started spending their ARPA money, and they didn't really spend any last year. So that's why those departments are up. So do you guys have any questions on those reports?
Do you have any questions at this time?
Okay, so I have something else. So next week, I'm also coming to you with another resolution, and that's asking for permission to write off some old taxes. We have $10.09 in real estate taxes that are over 20 years old, and the state statute says that you can't pursue taxes after they get to a certain age, and for real estate it's 20 years. And then for personal property, we have $543.23 that's over 5 years old, so we need to write those off. So you'll see that next week.
All right.
On that?
I have to say, every time I look through these reports, like I circle stuff that I have questions about, and then the next page I flip over and there are the answers.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is the financial review presentation by Davenport and Company. Mr. Davis, who do we have speaking to that?
Tonight we have Ted Cole and Ben Wilson with us from Davenport and Company. They will be sharing with you where we are financially, and also to share. I asked them to share, as you know, one of the things I would like to accomplish is at some point in time is getting actually rated by agencies. And so they did a mock review of that, and they'll be able to share with you tonight. It's not obviously the same as going to those agencies, but there's a formula that they have the ability to somewhat give you an idea of what that might look like. So I'll turn it over to Ted and Ben.
Great. Good evening. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is purely informational, not looking for any action or decisions, but would like to keep it conversational. I know we're sort of trying to move through your agenda, so we're going to go at a fairly high level, quick clip, but happy to dig in if you do have questions as we go. And hopefully you are seeing what I'm seeing here, right, on your screens. Staff does have this electronically if anybody would like a copy of it. We're just going to go through the first 5 sections, if you will, and we're going to talk a little bit about some peer city and town groups so we can give you some perspective on how you compare to other similar local governments. We're going to talk a little bit about credit ratings or bond ratings, cover some general fund operations and fund balance slides. And we're going to talk about existing debt, that is all the debt that's on the books today that you've committed to, and then we're going to give you a little bit of perspective on going forward as you all are talking about capital planning and capital projects. You know, if debt is a tool that you want to use going forward, give you a little bit of perspective on your debt affordability. And then there's several things in the appendix which you can go through, detail of your debt, your policies as they exist today. I do think there may be some discussion coming forward as part of the budget where maybe you'll be revisiting some of those policies with staff. And then because some of you we've not presented to, we've got an overview of our municipal finance group. So that's our goals. Page topics for discussion, there are page numbers in the bottom right. Again, we're going to cover these. I think we basically have covered that slide already with the table of contents. All right, so peer groups. And when we had met with staff, we wanted to provide some perspective about how you compare under different measures, primarily financial measures, to other local governments. And what we've done is we've gone and looked at a number of resources, and we've come up with 3 peer groups. Peer group number 1 are similarly sized towns, and we're looking at that as it relates to population and general fund budget. It's not a perfect comp, right? There are a few that line up well, but it's a range, and we've come up with, give or take, a dozen local governments. All of them are towns that fit within a reasonable range of the town of Farmville. And you'll see on the far right that a couple of them do have bond ratings outstanding, Abington and Purcellville. But a number of them don't, and that's not because they're not creditworthy. They just have never needed to establish a rating, pretty much like you all. Group 2 are towns or cities, in this case, that have some sort of an institutional presence by way of a college, a university, something like that, right? So we got Blacksburg, Radford, Lexington, Ashland, and Bridgewater. Again, you all are a town that has a significant institutional presence with Longwood, and so there's a dynamic there when you start comparing tax bases, other economic factors that a large student population or a tax-exempt entity can skew some of that. So that's the thinking behind peer group number 2. And then lastly, we call it sort of others, and you'll notice all of these do have a bond rating. They are, in several cases, larger than you all from a population or budget perspective, but they're rated, and we thought that was a helpful peer group because you can see what, under our comparisons, how highly rated communities rank. So that was the thinking. And, you know, we then go in and we sort of show you, you know, the geography related to the first peer group, similarly sized towns. I'm not going to dwell on that. You can see the university towns, the key stats, if you will, between population and budget, and then finally these other rated towns, okay? So that's the introduction of that, and that'll be meaningful here in a few slides. So we'll talk a little bit about credit ratings. All 3 national rating agencies on the left-hand side, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch, have a rating scale, with AAA being the highest bond rating that any local government or state can achieve, city, county, town, state. And you go down from AAA, you go into the AA category, and there's 3 levels. Then you get into the single A category, there's 3 levels. And then you get down into the triple B category. On the right-hand side, we subscribe to a database that Moody's, one of the rating agencies, maintains. And in the upper half of the right-hand side, you'll see across the country, we're talking about cities and towns, not counties. We specifically source them out. AAA, there's 200 plus AAA cities and towns. AA, there's about 1,300. In single A, there's about 550. And then maybe a little more relevant, within Virginia, by Moody's, one of the 3 agencies, they have 10 cities and towns that are rated AAA, 20 that are AA, and 4 that are single A. Okay, so that gives you a sense of who's rated in Virginia. And again, there are many that aren't rated because they just haven't needed to. And that may be because they don't do a lot of borrowing, and when they do, maybe they borrow from banks or through one of the state agencies, and a bond rating isn't required for those. But as the manager said, there is no reason you can't get a bond rating if you want to. There is a cost associated with it, but from time to time, people choose to do that. Okay? A little bit about how the rating agencies rate local governments, and I'll focus mostly on the upper left with Moody's. A lot of times people think it's all about debt. You know, how much debt you have drives your bond rating, and in reality, that's an important part of it, but as you go down the chart in the upper left, the economy is worth about 30% of the rating. So they're looking at tax base, they're looking at wealth levels, they're looking at economic output, things that they source to maybe the census or the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They're sourcing data. And a lot of those things, you all as an elected body, you don't control that budget to budget. You know, you can't move the needle on tax base and economy and wealth levels. That's in a short term. That's a longer term play to make it a community where people want to invest and move to and create jobs. So that's something that is you have longer term control over. 30% of the rating. Finances is 30% of the rating. You do have a little more control there, right? Decisions that you make throughout the year as part of the budget, how you perform relative to budget, reserve levels, things like that. That's 30% of the rating. Institutional framework, that is a function of being a Virginia town. You get a good score for that, so that's not something you control. They just view Virginia as a good local government state as opposed to other states where local governments have less control over things. And then finally, leverage. That's debt and debt-like items like pensions and post-employment benefits. Again, here, you've got some short-term control on that, depending on what kind of decisions you make, for example, about capital projects, and do you cash fund them or debt fund them. So there's a lot of different areas they look at, some of which you can manage more adeptly than others or longer term. And so part of positioning yourself, I guess if that were the right term, to reflect well in the rating process is to try to manage those things where you can well, and hopefully if you have weaknesses in other areas, you know, you're offsetting that with strengths in areas where you can control it. Okay? S&P gets to about the same place, just a few more moving parts. But it's not all about debt. We thought we would dig in a little bit to the Moody's approach, and on the left-hand side, it's basically a 3-pronged approach. They start with data from budgets, audits, and census. It's very data-driven, 15 or 20 different inputs that they put into a model, and from that model comes an initial rating level. The next step, number 2, is some very specific notching factors having to do with different ways of accounting and auditing. Most of these don't apply, none of these actually apply to you all, and very few of them would apply to a Virginia local government. So these notching factors aren't particularly relevant in our case. And then the third is a little bit of a catch-all that gives that rating analyst some discretion to take into account things that aren't captured in the numbers, more of the story, the subjective elements of a community. And that's really where they can adjust the output from number 1 that's very data-driven for things, again, that aren't captured in the numbers. So it's a process with the rating analyst and the credit committee to sort of land at an actual rating. Okay? 13 just goes into some more detail about all the different calculations that they do. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but again, the scorecard, which is the first step, is very data-driven. And as Scott said, we took it upon ourselves to put a sample together using the most recent information we have. And so when you look at this table, on the left-hand margin are all the inputs that go into this scorecard. Under column B in the blue is the inputs that we have used for the town of Farmville. And everything in the middle is where you land in the rating spectrum. You want those green boxes further to the left. Further to the left means you're scoring well, scoring strongly for each of those inputs. And you can see for the finance and for the debt, you're scoring very well. Those are as far over to the left as you can get. Where you're lagging a little bit is some of those economy things. And I think some of that is attributable to being a smaller local government, elements being a little more rural. I think there are elements of the university that can drag some of that because you have students that that if they are getting captured here, they don't have income largely. So there's some noise, if you will, that goes on with some of that. But that's the area where maybe you're lagging a little bit, but you go over to the far right and you get to a weighted score for all of these, and you go down and you see that the weighted score is about a 2.72, and that puts you in the AA category. So that is the initial scorecard indicated rating based on the data. And then from there, as I said, there are those notching factors, which again, we don't believe apply. But the third piece being sort of the story, more understanding about things that aren't captured in the scorecard. So as Scott said, this is not where your rating would be. It could be, but we're putting this here as it's a sort of high-level order of magnitude where you would come out on the data-driven part of the rating process, where you end up could be in that rating category, the rating category above or below. And that's not unusual. It is not always the case where the rating where the scorecard puts you is where you end up with the actual rating. There are many communities that have an actual rating that's either above or below their scorecard for the reasons I talked about, those more subjective analyst inputs. But it's certainly a good place to be starting based on the data. Okay? All right, so I think Ben is picking up on the general fund financials.
Yeah, so these next two sections are really focusing on Farmville and what's going on with your finances and what debt you have outstanding right now. So if we're looking at page 16 there, top left, we're looking at a comparison of your expenditures versus your revenues. That blue line is the revenues that you have each year. That includes transfers in from other funds. And you can see that each year of the 5 years that we're looking at, those revenues have exceeded your expenditures, which is a good thing. The bottom left, we're looking at your fund balance, so your reserves. That too has grown over the past 5 years, and that's related to the fact that your revenues have exceeded your expenditures. One thing we did want to point out is in the last 2 years, 22 and 23, even if you took out those transfers in from other funds, your revenues still would have exceeded your expenditures. So that's good shape there. If we flip to page 17, this is really digging in on your fund balance. So on the left side, we've got a table of, at the very top, just your revenues and expenditures for reference. And then the middle section there, we're really getting into what sort of fund balances do you have. There's several different categories with different restrictions and things you're able to do with those funds. But really what we're going to focus on mostly here is line 17 there, your unassigned fund balance. And you can see over this 5-year period, that's grown from $688,000 to about $3.9 million. The town does have a fund balance policy, and that's, again, like Ted mentioned, included in the appendix there under tab B. But the policy is that you will maintain a minimum of 10% of the general fund budget in unassigned fund balance, and you target 12%. And you can see in 22 and 23, you have exceeded those levels. And the graphs on the right side are percentages of revenues, and the bottom right is percentage of expenditures. And like I mentioned, in 2022 and 2023, that light green line, that's your unassigned fund balance as a percentage of your budget, that has exceeded that policy goal of 12%. The next two pages that we're looking at are those peer comparatives that Ted walked through earlier. So we've got our 3 peer groups, and Farmville is at the top there. You can see on the left side, we have the unassigned fund balance as a dollar amount. And you can see Farmville's a little bit lower than a lot of those peers, but that has to do with your budget. And that's why on the right side, we're looking at that unassigned fund balance as a percent of your budget, and that's at 26.8% for Farmville. And you can see that the peers that are similarly sized are a little bit higher, but you are very much in line with the other university towns and cities, and you're pretty close to the peer group down at the bottom, those other rated towns. So it may look like you're a little bit lower, but based on the size of your budget, we think that that looks pretty good. On the next page, we're just looking at total fund balance. So this pulls in all those other categories that might have some restrictions on them. And same for all these other localities. On the left side, again, we're looking at the dollar amount, and on the right side, we're looking at a percentage of your revenues. So that covers the finance section that we have. To get into the debt a little bit, on page 21, we are looking at the debt that the town currently has outstanding. On the left side, top left, that's the debt service that you'll be paying over the next really 5 years. So that's principal plus interest. And in 2024, that's about 1.4 million. That's going to step down in 2025 to about $1 million. And then by 2027 and 2028, you will have paid off most of the debt that you have outstanding. The bottom left there is just showing the principal that's outstanding as of the end of the last fiscal year. You have a bond outstanding with the Virginia Resources Authority from 2012. That there's about $3 million of that outstanding at this point, and that's really what's going to get paid off over the next couple years. And those other obligations are mostly just note payable, small things, and that's really the tail end in 2027 and 2028. The right side, we're looking at a peer comparative again of your debt outstanding of about $3.4 million compared to these other localities. And you can see that you're very much in line with the similarly sized towns, and you have significantly less debt than the other university towns and the other rated towns. And that's mainly because those localities are much bigger. We're talking about Blacksburg and other big localities. So not very much debt outstanding at this point, and it will all be paid off within the next 5 years. The next couple pages, we're going to look at some key debt ratios that you all have policies for, and these are the same kinds of things that the rating agencies will be looking at when they review you if you do decide to go and get a rating. The first one we're looking at is the 10-year payout ratio. So this is measuring how much of your debt will be paid off within the next 10 years as a percent of all of the debt you have outstanding. Now, in your case, all of your debt will be repaid in the next 5 years, so your percentage is 100%. All of your debt will be paid off within the next 10 years. On the right side, you can see the comparative. That is the case for some other localities, particularly those that are of similar size to you. But the localities that are larger and rated have lower percentages where they've gone out and they've probably borrowed more recently and have longer terms, 20, 25, 30 years. Your policy is 50%, and right now, obviously, you are well above that policy, which is where you want to be, 100%.
Higher is better in that case. You want to be above that red line.
Yep. Now the next two, lower is better. So in this page, we are looking at debt as a percentage of your assessed value. Now your policy is that your debt as a percentage of your real estate assessed value should not be more than 3%. Based on your real estate assessment that's in the 2023 audit and the debt that you have outstanding, that's about 0.5% right now. So policy's 3%, you're well below that. Lower is better. We're in good shape there. On the right side, again, you're very much in line with your similarly sized towns. A couple of the larger towns, those are actually really cities. Lexington and Radford there have higher percentages, and that's mainly because they have to fund schools as well.
Ben and Ted, can I point out one thing? So from past experience, one of the things when you do go to rating agencies is they look at those the constant that you have, which is real estate property, in that and how what you're paying. And that's why you have a policy that says what percentage of your real estate traditionally in a locality. And I think it goes to what Ted said earlier, some of those things that they look at in the economy of, we have most of ours, if you look, our real estate is not our top performing tax revenue. Our variable taxes are high performing tax revenue, but they're variable. And so that does give them some concern at those rating agencies at times, that's how you're going to be paying your debt, is based on what people are buying, meals, sales tax, and those types of things. And I think just to give a scenario or a depiction of, that's when some of those conversations come in, other than just the number as a factor.
That's right, absolutely. I mean, real property taxes are viewed as a very solid stream of revenue for good reason. That's not a big driver for you all. It's important, but you also have a fair amount of tax-exempt property in town. So, but you also have a lot of kids in town, so they're spending money and they're doing things, and people are coming in from other places as this is a place to do business and shop. So you have other, albeit more volatile, economically sensitive revenues, but it does create a diversity of activity and economic activity. So that's where they're trying to understand, how is the university doing, right? What's their vulnerabilities? Is their enrollment steady? Is enrollment growing? Those are the kind of things that they start to dig into when that kind of an entity is playing a significant role in your community. So it ends up being not only a conversation about the town, but a little more focused conversation about major entities within the town that a large city might not have to discuss because it's such a broad tax base and economy. So it can play to your favor because they view hospitals and universities as being somewhat defensive to poor economies and things like that, but it also, they gotta ensure that there aren't any underlying vulnerabilities there either. I mean, a university versus a paper mill, right? You go to West Point, there's a large paper mill. That's a very different institutional presence than a university, but they both, on paper, kind of impact the financials somewhat similarly. So every place is a little different and unique, and that's, to your point, I think, where they start to have the analyst be able to go in and dig into things beyond what they put in that scorecard.
But we just need to be mindful that we want to be mindful of not having but so much debt, because that we have to rely on our property tax. That, yes, we have great meals tax now, but next year it may not be that way, or the next year. So we've got to keep it pretty close to what we can afford based on real estate tax.
Yeah. So that pretty much covers that debt to assessed value page. The next ratio that we look at is debt service to expenditures. So this is looking at how much you are paying on an annual basis for debt service and comparing it to the size of your budget, what portion of your budget is going to paying principal and interest. You all have a policy of 10% that may be revisited later this spring, but 10% is the current policy that's in place, and based on your 23 audit, that's your percentage is about 9.9%. So you're in compliance with that, and that's projected to go down as your budget grows with the economy and as your debt is paid off. We know that your debt is being paid down over the next several years, so that will go away. On the right side, we're looking at the debt service as a percentage of expenditures for the peers. You're a little bit above the peer median, but as your debt service steps down, you will be very much in line with these other localities. Now, the last 2 pages of this section, the first we're looking at your legal debt limit. So this is what the Commonwealth actually allows you to borrow. And your legal debt limit is very similar to that debt to assessed value calculation, but it only takes into account general obligation debt. So those notes payable, that's a small portion of the debt that you have outstanding, those don't count towards this calculation. But on the right side there, we're performing the calculation so you can see what your legal debt margin is, how much you could borrow technically under the Commonwealth's rules. The top right, we're looking at the debt outstanding. There's GO bonds that are tax supported and tax supported notes payable. That's what we were looking at on that earlier page. You also have about $2.4 million worth of utility supported general obligation debt outstanding. That's not included in this book, but it will count towards this calculation. And the calculation in the bottom right is looking at that real estate assessed value. So the same value we were looking at for that earlier ratio, and it says that you can only issue as much general obligation debt as 10% of that real estate assessed value. Now, your real estate assessed value in 2023 was $662 million. 10% of that would be 66.2. And right now you have about $5.5 million worth of general obligation debt outstanding. So that capacity that you have within the Commonwealth's rules is about 60.8 million. Now, we wouldn't expect that you would come anywhere near to getting close to that.
We could never pay that debt, by the way.
Other localities.
They may allow us legally. We cannot afford that much debt.
Right.
You would have a hard time borrowing that much money, right? And there's lots of reasons, but there are communities that are small and they've done debt for one reason or another, and they start bumping up against that legal limit you all clearly have. There are other limiting factors to your debt issuance future besides the legal debt.
And that's a great segue into what we're going to be talking about on this page and the last section of this presentation is really your tax-supported debt affordability. And just to orient you on this page, the left side, columns B, C, D, and E, those are your requirements going forward. The debt service, right now what's loaded in here is just the debt service that you have to pay over the next 5 years. And you can see that declines just like we were looking at on the graph on the earlier page. In the middle section, we have the revenues that you currently have available for debt service. You budgeted in fiscal year 2024 to be able to pay $1,381,000 worth of debt service. And assuming that those revenues are available going forward, in column I, you can see that as your debt is paid off, you have some capacity or some affordability rather to be able to pay on debt service for new debt, if that is something that you would like to pursue in the future. And really you can see that steps up. You've got about $350,000 in 2025, and then it steps up to 1.2, and then finally you get that full $1,381,000. The bottom right-hand corner there, that's just showing on a graph what that looks like. The gold line there being what you could use for future debt service. And really, we're going to get into that in this next section that Ted's going to talk about.
Yeah, so it's just as debt is paying down each year, if you were to continue to make the same dollars available each year, it allows you to, I guess, consider that you could afford some new debt for whatever the purpose may be. Or you redeploy those freed up dollars somewhere else in your budget, right? You move those dollars over to the operating budget, or you save them, or you reduce a rate, whatever, evolves through the budget process. But that nice decline in your debt does present an opportunity if you want to consider doing some things on the capital side to backfill into that budget with less of an impact than there might otherwise be. If your annual payments were flat and not going down, to do anything would take new revenues. But because they're declining, there's at least an opportunity to consider doing some other things. And so what we've backed into was a little bit about what does that translate to for potential capital. Page 28 here on the left is just that same graph, right? If you just hold it constant at $1.4 million a year, you've got lots of room under that gold dotted line where you could take on additional annual payments. And on the right, what we're assuming is we're going to tell you within the next 5 years approximately how much debt could be issued, assuming that if you did the debt, it would be a 20-year debt at 5%. That's sort of our assumption. And it all comes together on page 29. And essentially what it's telling you in that column B is if you were to continue to budget that same amount per year, about $1.4 million, and if you were issuing debt for a 20-year term at 5%, you go to the middle of that column, beginning in fiscal 25 through 29, over that period of time, you could issue in the range of about $17 million worth of debt. Not all at once. It would have to happen over time. You would have to continue to budget that same amount as you do currently. But it is order of magnitude. If you wanted to do 10-year debt or 15-year debt, you couldn't do quite as much because the payback is faster. So it's just giving you a little perspective. We don't have a good sense of sort of what the capital plan is going forward. I know that's something you'll probably be talking about or are talking about as part of the budget, but thought that maybe some of this was just good perspective as you get into that if you evolve to a place where you want to do capital and pay as you go is one approach, but you want to know if you have other options, it certainly seems reasonable that there could be a discussion about using debt if you decided to. Not advocating for it and say it's the right thing, but it's certainly a reasonable conversation. In the bottom of column B, there's some red. What that's telling us is if you were to do that much debt, that $17 million, hypothetically, you would have some issues with some of your current debt policies. So it doesn't even necessarily work for some of the policies as they're currently written, but we wanted to focus more on what would be potentially affordable based on that flat line of that current debt service appropriation. So it's just perspective going into budget and capital.
We won't be building a lot of new buildings, obviously, if you can tell.
So and we wrapped up, I think the last slide to cover is really page 30, and that is as things evolve, if things evolve, different avenues to issuing debt for local governments, direct bank loan. The town has done that on a number of occasions, using some state agencies, primarily the Virginia Resources Authority. You've done that as well. The public issuance of debt is an option, probably not one that's necessary here, but it is an option where you kind of go out to the market with bonds or other state or federal programs. So if I could leave you with anything is, from what we've seen, you've had very good financial trends operationally. You've been growing fund balance. You're in compliance with your policy and then some. What debt you've issued in the past, you've done it pretty judiciously. You haven't overdone it. You really have a relatively low debt profile. You're in compliance with all of your policies. That debt service to expenditures is a little tight, but it is in compliance. And you have what we would consider to be good debt affordability, meaning if you wanted to move forward with capital projects, it would be a very reasonable conversation if debt was part of the funding plan. I think that's it. We're well over 20.
That's a healthy dose, but very illuminating for sure. I think, one, it reinforces a sentiment that we have expressed on this dais as far as our financial footing and feeling increasingly more and more secure as we've gone through these last 5 years and feeling very confident and good about where we're going. But also illuminating, as you said, for projecting forward and thinking about projects and ideas and thoughts, particularly when it comes to the 5-year CIP and just food for thought in general. Very good. Do we have any questions at this time for the folks? I know that was like drinking from a fire hose, so it'd be a little tough.
And I
but-
do have this in a PDF that I'll email you
Excellent.
all tomorrow that you'll have.
Given, one of the things that I do think about, and Scott raised it, and it came up during COVID naturally for a town of our style, is that variable revenue from the tax. And having a lot of eggs in that basket, making you potentially vulnerable to shifts and things that are outside of your control. And so is that something like, is the strengthening of that real estate base something that you see as an importance in, if we were to drive towards a bond rating?
I think if to the extent you can, yes, I think that would round out the economy part of that scorecard is a larger, more diverse tax base. And I know that's one thing to say and another thing to actually do it and implement it. But I think that absolutely would be viewed positively if there's a way to steer it in that direction.
And Mayor, if I could, it's difficult for towns more so than it is cities and counties with real estate tax being the tier one of the taxes that you generate. Because as a town, the residents also pay county real estate tax. Whereas if you're a county or a city, those residents are only paying one real estate tax. Might be a lot higher, don't get me wrong. I can tell you where I came from was $1.20 per hundred from a city standpoint, which is more than the county and town combined here. But there is that pushback that you would get on how much we could do that over time, because they're going to say we also pay tax to the county, not just you all. Whereas the county and town don't have that added part that that the resident pays additional tax to.
Simple. Anybody else at this time? But you will get us copies of that presentation. All right. All right. Well, I thank you, gentlemen, very much. I think got
Appreciate it.
loud.
Thank you.
He's here. Next item on the agenda is the public safety radio presentation by Trey Pyle from Prince Edward County, Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator. How you doing, Mr. Pyle?
Doing well. How are y'all?
Good.
So y'all go from good news talking about your debt service to me trying to get you to spend some money. So I'd see that. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thank y'all for having me this evening. We've been in conversation with Scott over the past couple months, and I know we've talked about this once before. Some of this may look familiar to y'all from that joint town council public board supervisors meeting. I kind of want this to be more of an informative question and answer as we go through here. I don't want to death by PowerPoint if you've seen it. If there's a question about a slide as I move through it, please let me know. Let's stop right there, talk about it, and we'll go through there. So again, we're coining this as a regional public safety radio system, and the main reason for that is the partners that are involved. We've got a state agency, a private college, a town, and a county. And beyond that, we have state parks inside the county. We have state police works inside the county. We have a large magnitude of people that are here every day operating on this system. So I really wanted to make y'all aware of why that verbiage is being used for the future. this slide? All right. My next slide was supposed to show you. I don't know where it went. Maybe it's the next one. So project history. Let's talk about where we started. So back in 2022, we started with CTA Consultants to sit down and do a study. We reached out to them. We did some vetting on their services. I had personally been involved in a study they had done in another locality. Really had good remarks from that locality. They had positive feedback. We worked with them. They came in to do the study. Really went above and beyond what I thought they were going to do. They came in and not only were talking to us on a fire rescue sheriff's office standpoint, which is where this project started. They came in, they talked to the town, they talked to Longwood, they talked to Hampton-Sydney, they visited both dispatch centers, our public works, animal control, town public. I mean, they talked to anybody and everybody that touches our radio, which really gave them a vision of where we are and where we probably should go in the future. Can't see exactly where we're at there. After that, we negotiated with them to, the study came back and they told us that we needed to go to a trunked UHF radio system. That's kind of about the same time I presented that to y'all at that joint meeting, kind of the vision of where we wanted to go. We took that information and we turned it into a contract with them to go out for procurement for documentation and to negotiate and engage with a vendor of our choice. The choice was selected for Motorola because of the infrastructure already in place in Prince Edward County. Sheriff's Office already had a system similar. The town had just worked with them to put in a system for the police department, and nobody wants to see any of that infrastructure lost. We want to use that infrastructure to build it into a better system. So we did that. In December of this year, we kind of got a little ahead of the ball, but we had a negotiated price that was good till the end of the year. We had to get into a contract with them. The Board of Supervisors agreed to that contract. We signed with them in December to lock in the price, contingent on all the partners coming on board. Now, we have met with Longwood and Hampton-Sydney, and we've got a verbal that they're on board. Y'all are the last partner that we're talking to now to try to get this whole contract solidified so we can move forward. So the next page, the next part of
I'm sorry, can you pick the mic up closer? Because I can't hear as well, and I know that people that are listening online won't be able to hear you. I mean, like literally, it's got to be up there close enough to hear.
Better? All right, there we go. All right, your next slide, it's a snapshot of the partners like I was talking about. This is a vision of where this system really is and where it's going, because there's so many people in this county that operate on the radio system day in and day out. So the current radio system issues that we ran into when the study was done, if you look on the left-hand side, that's the Sheriff's Office current coverage. If you look on the right-hand side, that's fire rescue. They operate both off of independent towers. Hampton-Sydney water towers, where the Sheriff's Office is, that coverage is portable coverage. Outside of that range, they really lose their coverage. It's spotty. They don't know when they key up if they have service or not. Fire rescue is very similar on the right. They work off of one antenna on Lee Mountain. And as you well aware, Lee Mountain is on the far eastern side of the county. So the western side, they have lacks in coverage in the valleys and the holes in the terrain when it changes. So your next slide is just a synopsis of the systems. I know we went through this once before, but it basically, at the end of the day, everybody has one channel, one repeater, and that's all they got. There's no way to upgrade unless we add another repeater and another channel, and all that costs money at the end of the day. So when the CTA did their study and they sat down with all the public safety agencies in the county, they had a map, big map on a desk, and they said circle areas that you have issues at. So all of those circles represent a department or agency saying, hey, we were on a call here and we couldn't talk on our radio, or we were here and we never even had connectivity. I can tell you that this map probably doesn't do it justice for it actually what it is in the end of the day. And I know Chief Clark has a few words after I finish, and I know he can attest to the issues that we deal with day in and day out. But some of the issues that were pointed out, and that was the lack of redundancy, the lack of capacity, the lack of coverage, which that map shows you, the previous map and this one shows issues you had. Operability and interoperability, from a planning standpoint, we realized that when Heart of Virginia is planning, or Rock the Block's being played. We're trying to find that frequency that everybody can come to operate so we can all be safely, coordinated, and we didn't have that. We were trying to find that channel. The town does a really good job about planning those events. They have a lot of meetings prior to, and they have a really good plan in place, but it's always comes back to that communication aspect of it. How are we going to stay connected during the event? And then the biggest one was equipment end of life. Fire Rescue's repeater is about 30 years old. It's actually a loaner repeater that I secured from Lunenburg for right now for free of charge. That's all we got. I mean, I had to source that out in the middle of the night one night because Crystal from dispatch had called and she's like, what are we going to do? And I just started making phone calls, and we found it, put it in service the next day, and that's what we're operating on right now. They don't make that repeater, and to upgrade it is about $60,000. So it didn't make a lot of sense to spend money on something currently if we can patch it together until we can get to that point. So the proposed system from CTA was UHF P25 Phase 2 trunked simulcast county-wide radio system. And they gave us both options, and if y'all remember from the presentation prior to, I showed you kind of the two options and the chart and all that. And they really felt county-wide was the best bang for your buck. Why build a system that's going to do two agencies or two groups, and then y'all got your own system, and then, we're all maintaining the same equipment, but we're doing it separately, and we're spending the same money. That's a lot of words up there on the top. The biggest thing to take away from it is, for one, the bands that everybody's on, which is UHF, is staying the same. None of that changes. The phase 2 for trunking is no different. It's basically saying we're taking the frequency bands on one antenna and we're splitting it into two talk paths. So we can carry on two conversations off of one antenna. So for every antenna you put up, put two up, you get 4, 3 up, you get 6. It basically splits it in half. This radio system will fix the issues that we had identified: the operability, the coverage, the interoperability. It fixes the long-term cost. We're not having to all maintain our own systems and pay the same price. We can pay one price together. The cost effectiveness and the flexibility of channels and talk groups. When you go to do the planning, if Andy and Chief Clark came together and said, hey, we're having an issue, we know this is going to be a problem in 6 months, we don't have that channel for Rock the Block or Heart of Virginia Festival. You can put that channel in, reprogram radios, and everybody's got it. It's not a problem. With the trunking system, your limit is basically your imagination. You can add as many talk groups as you want up to the capacity of the radio, and we can continue to grow with the population and the need of the county and the town together. So what's the system fix? It makes communication simplified. Again, the planning, fire rescue, multi-jurisdictional events, or calls for service that may be had. If there's a call near the county line or the town and county in the Cumberland, and we got multiple counties coming in, we get everybody on the same page, everybody on the same system, everybody can talk. Robust, basically when you key the radio up, you're getting a connection back to dispatch. So you're going to be heard, and they're going to be able to respond appropriately and get you what you need. Currently, I can tell you right now that it's key up, wait for them to say, hey, I can't hear you. Key up again, try it, turn the body a different way. Maybe they heard you, try it again. Worst case scenario, pick your cell phone up and call it. Nobody has time to pick your cell phone up, try to call dispatch in the middle of I'll call. And then dependable. Basically the system will be maintained. It's gonna have a contract on it throughout the maintenance of the program over 14, 15 years. The system will be revamped twice. So every 4 to 5 years, the system will be completely upgraded, moved on, and we won't be behind times looking at a 30-year-old system like we have currently on Lee Mountain. So the proposed radio system design currently, the main location will be Dominion Tower. There's enough room on there to utilize the equipment that's already in place from PD. We're going to add up, put our system in, put a new shelter in, move everything into one combined building, and that's where the core will be for the system. So basically on a trunk system, it's an IT-based system. And I have a picture later to show you, we're going from something probably to half the size of this desk to something that'll fill up a 10 by 15 room. It's just what it takes to operate that system. So that Dominion Tower will be the main site. The second site will be on Douglas Church Road. There's a 300-foot tower down there. We found out that actually nobody's on it. So we're hoping we can get pretty high up on the tower and give us good coverage. And then the third site is in Prospect, right down the road from the convenience site on 460. There's just west of the convenience site.
What happens, Trey, if one of the sites go down?
Okay, so if one site goes down and loses connectivity, the other two can still operate independently. There's no problems. We'll be notified immediately that that tower has lost connectivity for some reason. I've been told by people who use systems similar to this that the likelihood of the entire tower going dark is very, very slim. You may lose an antenna, you may lose a connection. Most of the stuff is very quick and easy to get fixed. But if the one tower goes down, the two will still cover the county. You may have some spots that may be limited, but
Is there anything we can add to that tower to make sure that we can get it back up running quickly?
yeah, so they're monitored in the maintenance agreement that we have. They're monitored remotely, and there'll be alarms. They'll go off at dispatch, and then whoever else we dictate, myself, Doug, whoever gets the notification. The contract has on-site service within 24 hours to have the problem fixed. So that's about the quickest we can do is get notified that there is an issue and then getting somebody on site to fix it. I hope that answers questions best.
It does. I mean, we just had this conversation years ago, and we did have something to go down, and we're just looking for a backup for it.
Right.
So I was just hoping that this would have, and I understand it's within 24 hours, and maybe they'll come sooner, what have you, but it just depends on what's going on. But just hypothetically, if we have emergency going on in that area, will the other two towers be able to reach that area for the communication, I guess, is what
Yeah,
I'm
so
asking.
I've seen maps of each tower independently covering the county, and I can tell you right now, just based off Farmville PD's current system, y'all pretty much have countywide coverage on a mobile already. So just off Dominion alone, we're getting that coverage already, which is great, because that gives me a lot of confidence that the maps that I'm seeing are going to be truthful and that we're going to have that great coverage. So if you take two antennas, either north and south, east and west, whatever, I feel pretty confident that we're going to have coverage we need even until we get that tower back up and running.
I guess my next question is it possible to have another antenna up on somewhere else in case one does go down, you can switch over?
So as far as a whole system being put up again, I don't know that that's financially feasible, but there will be additional, like Lee Mountain, for example, the fire rescue repeater, they're going to change the repeater base out because it's already on the STARS tower. We're going to change the repeater base out and keep it running for simulcast dispatch. So anybody with an old radio or old pager, they can still be alerted for calls. That will be a backup channel we can use if we need to. There will be a tower antenna on Douglas Church that for Charlotte County units coming in to talk to us. So all of those gateways will be available for backup if something does happen to the true hard system. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the locations? I'm sorry.
Have you gotten permission to use those towers yet?
So we have conditional papers that they will allow us to get there. We got to work through that whole negotiation of the lease and all that, and that comes as we move forward from here. With y'all's blessing to be partners with us, we'll go into that part negotiations next.
Are you fairly confident you can work something out?
Yeah, feel pretty good. I mean, we're already on Dominion. Douglas Church doesn't have anybody. The only one is going to be the Prospect one, and they've already been in contact about putting fiber out there, and they haven't had any issues. So, so basically, just to give you an overview of what trunking is, sometimes when I talk about it, people are like, "Yeah, why are you putting the radio in your trunk? What does that do?" And you get that. People are like, "We don't need trunking. We don't need that radio in the trunk. That's old school back in the day." That's really not what trunking is. So trunking is basically using a computer software. So when you key the radio up, it tells you, "Hey, you're going to use this channel." You key the radio back up, "Hey, you're going to use this channel." It's basically a way of organizing the traffic and not sticking to one channel. So right now, for example, Farmville PD, when they key the radio up, they're talking on their 460 frequency, and that's it. So on the new system, there's going to be 4 groups of channels. And when you key up, you might be on this 460 this time, 461 the next time, 460. It doesn't matter. That gives you the capacity to move around and have the whole system at your disposal. Because we all know at night, Hampton-Sydney may get a little bit quieter. Longwood may not have as much going on. Fire rescue may get 2 house fires. They may be on 2 different talk groups. there's plenty of capacity there, and now we can separate those channels. Makes dispatch easier because there's a dispatcher assigned to that call, so they know what, hey, I got this house fire, this dispatcher's got that house fire. It could be an EMS call, whatever it may be. They don't have that talking over everybody. Plus, we've got the capacity to do that if we need to in the future, to build out more and more. So it's not the radio in your trunk trying to get you better coverage. It's basically a computer saying, hey, we're going to assign you to move around and talk on the right frequency at the right time. And really, when I use the word channel, I'm using the wrong term, but I try to keep it as easy as I can for people on it. It's talk group is technically what it's called. So this slide just shows you where we are now. Currently on the left-hand side is our conventional system. If you took all the systems we currently operate in Prince Edward, including town, county, Longwood, Hampton City, there's 6 systems in place. There's 6 antennas, different places, 6 frequencies. There's nowhere we can get any more capacity out of those without adding another antenna or adding another repeater. On the trunking side of it, with the current system proposed, there'd be 4 antennas per site, so 4 frequencies per site. And remember, if you divide those in half, we're going to get 2 talk paths out of every one. The one stays as a control all the time. It never gets split. It's just a control channel. But we can add talk groups to it. We can add channels. Fire Rescue wants to do something different. They want to change and add more ops channels or talk channels or TAC channels, or, you know, Farmville PD says, hey, we want something just dedicated for checking details. Okay, not a problem. We'll just reprogram it. We'll put it in there and you'll have it. It's just that simple. So they're common, they're shared, and we, like I said, we can add to them. So that's basically where we are, and hopefully what the trunking will do for us. So this is a picture of the current, the one on the right-hand side is a picture of the Fire Rescue repeater that is currently at Lee Mountain. You can tell it's pretty much just a box, right? It's in a rack, it's a box. The left-hand side is something you may see similar to, you know, like Hampton, you know, Longwood, a little smaller repeater. They don't have as much traffic. It can handle that. This is what will be at every site once you get upgraded. So as you can tell, we went from something that's in a rack to something that's taking an entire building up, something that's connected by fiber, something that's, you know, microwave is our primary connection, fiber is going to be our backup, so each site will have both. Then again, so if microwave goes down, we got fiber, we can get still connected. There will be a redundant core, a redundant ring, so the microwave won't just go around the county in one circle. They're going to double the microwaves up on each tower. If something happens between this connection, it's going to reverse and go back the other way. It's going to keep everybody connected until they can figure out what's going on. So this one really speaks volumes to where we're going from where we are. You know, people look at stuff and they're like, hey, what are you talking about? This is a lot of money. This is something big. This is why, because it's coming to a living, breathing type of machine. So this is just to jog your memory about coverage, where we were, and this is where we're going. So this is portable coverage with the radio on your hip, talking on a mic on your chest. And most firefighters are doing that. They're not picking the mic up, the radio up and talking on it. So the radio's down here, so you got body shielding already. But this is coverage with this current system in Prince Edward County proposed. So we go from this to this. That's pretty much 100% coverage. Now, when they do the testing for it, they have to meet 95% coverage. So that means that as we grid off the county and the town, respectively, anywhere that you can access by roadway, you have to meet coverage testing capabilities. And it's 95%. So, you know, most of them are hitting 97, 98%. I've heard some counties hit 99%. I feel real confident by looking at this map. The next map is by mobile coverage. So this is using the vehicle-mounted repeater, vehicle-mounted radio. As you can tell, it goes farther outside the county than just the county lines. This will speak volumes if we have to do some mutual aid or something. And, you know, until you can get to the next county system, this gives you the coverage to travel outside. Law enforcement gets in a pursuit. They're going into Cumberland. They've got connectivity to get back to the system, and they should have connectivity well into Cumberland. I've heard Farmville PD's traffic on 60 just outside Powhatan. So I think with this one, you're going to even get it further and clearer. So the most important thing you're probably interested in is what's the coverage in town. So we put requirements in there for the town that they have to have 15 dB, which is medium building coverage. So we're talking about like this building, Smaller, one-story, two-story buildings with brick facades type thing. It'll talk about penetration into that building. Longwood's buildings are more heavier construction, obviously, because they're concrete and steel and stuff like that. But 15 dB medium building coverage. The top part obviously is the town section. As you can tell, other than the section down there, kind of towards where PRJ is, where it drops off to the river, the town's covered completely. Hampton Sydney's down at the bottom, and I'll have this blown up for you here in just a second. Make sure, yeah, Hampton Sydney's the next one. Hampton Sydney's area got a little big. We've tweaked that with the contract now. It's actually just back to the campus area. But we thought that was important for them to make sure they have coverage. And thanks to y'all's current radio system, we accepted this map by using that system to test some of the holes at Hampton Sydney. I went to Kirby Fieldhouse. Kirby's Fieldhouse stood on the basketball court against the back wall with the shielding of the hill beside it, and I was able to get back to dispatch crystal clear. So I felt confident with this map, even though there's a hole on top of Kirby Fieldhouse, there's going to be coverage there. One thing this system does allow by going trunked is you have the option to build in Wi-Fi connections at the universities or at the hospital. So when you go into that building and you lose coverage, it'll connect to a Wi-Fi service, and you can talk through Wi-Fi back into the system. So essentially, if you had that set up on a handheld radio, you could be in California on Wi-Fi, key up, and talk back into Farmville. I mean, that's what the trunking capability does for you by having that connectivity. So I'll entertain any questions that y'all have, and I'll be glad to answer anything before I turn it over to Scott. I'll turn it back over to either Doug for finance, or Scott if you want to talk about finance, or Daniel for a few remarks.
Out of curiosity, when your coverage as far as, say, Charlotte County, if they want to talk back to this system, will their system integrate into this system as far as to talk?
So currently their system will not. They're on a conventional system. So we're going to have a gateway on that Douglas Church Tower. They'll switch to that frequency, and then dispatch will take care of that patch for us. So they'll still be able to talk on our system. It'll just be through a patch.
How about other surrounding counties?
There are other counties. We're actually working with Lunenburg on a patch to put the two systems between the two counties together. They're on a different band, but Motorola has worked a price out. We're trying to coin it as a regional concept for them to do this, try to get the price down, and try to make it a, hey, this is the first one in Virginia, let's do it. Basically, it takes two trunking systems and ties them together, and you share the coverage between the two systems. So there's extra connectivity options out there because of that. We're going to try to work through.
Trey, what's the time frame in completing a big project like this?
So the contract is 30 months. It could be as early as 24 months. The biggest thing it depends on is how fast the equipment comes in once they place the order, and coverage testing. So when they do coverage testing, they won't do it unless it's foliage on the trees. So from April 1st to October 1st, I believe they stopped now. They used to push it a little bit further, but they said they've noticed that it's not full foliage. So we've got a 5-6 month window there that we really got to fall in to do coverage testing. So it could be as much as 30 months.
You mentioned using fiber as far as for your system. What happens if somebody cuts the fiber?
So fiber is the backup. The first connectivity is the microwave. So that's how we stay connected on a regular basis. The fiber is the backup. If you lose connectivity to dispatch on that system, we can still talk amongst ourselves off the towers. You just won't have connectivity to every tower. So you can still be in a general area. If you're in the Pamplin area, you still use that Prospect Tower and talk. You just might not be able to get back to dispatch. But we still have those other channels also that are truly analog, old channels that we're going to keep up and running for paging and for gateways and stuff. We have that option to get back into dispatch also.
I just think it's something long overdue.
I believe so too. I've been a little history. I've been in fire and EMS for 22 years, and I'm gonna tell you that where we had a really good system 22 years ago, and it was one of the best in the area, it's gotten to the point where it's long overdue, and we're buying. We're living on borrowed time with it really. So, any other questions? All right.
Don't mind, I'll talk dollars real quick, and Trey stay up here with me, but this is a big investment, right? And you look at the breakout, we're talking it's 6.6 million. That's 6.3, but that's after, after the $1 million grant, the first grant you got. True price, 6.3 million. So we're looking at, potentially $660,000 a year, and that's on a 15-year lease purchase. So we're working with VML Vaco, and I actually serve on the VML Vaco. That's a combo of VML and Vaco Finance. They do lease purchasing. We've actually bought some landfill equipment from them, and y'all have done some police cruisers, I believe, in the last year. To look at financing, 15 years is about the extent because that's the life of the radio. Radios may last longer, but that's the extent they'll finance it. But we're looking at right now, $660,000. I'll say that we've still got a handful of grants that we're going after. What we're looking at doing with the financing is to be able, if we can get a COPS grant that can buy down the overall cost of the system, it's going to spread across to everybody who is a user or paying for the project. We're also looking at assistance firefighters grants, which would buy down the firefighters piece. That's a piece that right now is sitting under the county. Based on users, we're users in area combo, we're 77% of the project. The town's 20%. Longwoods 2, Hamp City 1, very small portions of the project. But obviously, to me, the interoperability with those two facilities is going to help us potentially get some additional grant money. State loves when localities and organizations work together on regional projects. I think this one has a lot of capability for us to get $2+ million in grant funding to bring this number down. Some of these grants won't be announced until summer or fall of this year, or possibly after. What we're looking to do is borrow the money, but have a prepayment option without penalty, so that if we get a $1 million grant, we can sit there and basically buy down that loan and get that annual cost down for us. Right now, on the full boat, we're looking at about $130,000 a year. If you were to finance, if the town wants to pay up front, we could do that. But as we work through this over the next 2, 3, 4 months, we'll want to see if that's the direction that council wants to go in. We're looking to try to capitalize some of the interest so that our first payment isn't really due to not July 1 of 24, but July 1 of 25. So it basically pushes it into that next 2 more fiscal years, so that we can build into our debt service. We've got a little over $100,000 in our budget this year. I'm proposing to add about 150, and I'll have to add probably 200 the year after. I've got to grow into that debt service. I can't take one bite of the apple, eat the elephant all at once.
Doug, the portion right now, our 20%, is it 1.4 million?
Well, with interest, it was about 1.8. Now you got to take the interest out, so it's about 1.4.
Yeah, so with 1.4, and if you don't mind, with 1.4 million, we can, by 2026, Julie and I have figured that we could pay out of pocket for that. And the reason we say that is, I'm not going to have the exact figures, so I'll look at her to verify what I'm saying. Is for wireless 911, we get about $400,000 a year, correct? We have, we have 400,000 currently. All right, so we have $600,000. And then we get how much a year out of that? All right, and then we also have a, the other fund that I was. I was thinking of another one that I had mentioned to you, but we could potentially have this by 2026 paid as we go, correct? our portion.
This really, and I appreciate Scott and staff have been great, working together. I think this wouldn't have happened 5 years ago. You all been in the community, wouldn't have happened 20 years ago. Didn't happen. It needs to happen. My best worst example, my wife taught the young lady who was the first child killed at Virginia Tech. And looking at that disaster, part of the issue was the response. You had all these different agencies showing up on scene, and they couldn't talk to each other. So the ability is paramount for fire and rescue, law enforcement. You have a big incident along with Hamp Sydney's going to be showing up, right? Everybody needs to be able to talk. This needs to happen. It's really a matter of how quickly can we get it done, and finding a way to pay for it. But it makes sense for the community for the long term. There's a couple $100,000 a year maintenance costs that we're going to have to eat, but that's after year one. Because that system gets refreshed every 4 years. So, that's something that we'll have ongoing. But the important thing for us right now is trying to build at least take care of the initial project costs. But so you'll end up with a 20% piece of that, unless the number of users on the system changes dramatically. Your percentage won't change much off that, Scott.
So just so you all know, the equipment that we bought 2 years ago now, I guess, and fully implemented last year for the police department and dispatch doesn't go to waste. All they do is reprogram the existing handhelds and in-car and in dispatch to make them trunking instead of the current conventional that we have. Yeah. So all that is not for nothing, but it drastically helps our fire department. Today, and do you mind, Doug, if I?
No, absolutely.
I just want to give Daniel a chance to tell you, in town, outside the fire department today, he could not communicate with his portable radio.
Yeah, so it's happened countless times. Today we had a vehicle overturned on its roof right in front of the fire station. Sometimes we were able to talk back to dispatch, other times we weren't. I had to run back and forth to my car several times because when I keyed up the radio to talk to them, they told me the only thing they could hear was squelch. So whether we were trying to call in for the helicopter that they were bringing in or calling in additional resources, the man was trapped underneath the steering wheel while the truck was overturned. So it was a very critical incident that we're trying to get resources in, and we just couldn't talk. And it's not the only time it's happened. The very first call I ran when I come to the town of Farmville was an odor investigation at the train station. And I couldn't talk to anybody. It just wouldn't work. Down here at Chick-fil-A, we've had calls, and you call dispatch, and they tell you, well, we can't copy you. So you just have to pull out your cell phone because radios don't work.
That's with the new system that we just put in place 2 years ago?
So the system,
No, the fire department does not have the new system.
Okay.
No. The fire department does not have the new system.
and
That's my
because
point.
of interoperability of the other fire rescue agencies in the county. Longwood is,
You're on your own separate.
yeah, well, we're along with the other fire departments throughout the county. We're on a separate system from the police departments. If we were on the same as the police department, then it'd be a nightmare for the fire departments to communicate with each other. Longwood is another example. Trey brought up about the in-building coverage. Right now, it nearly doesn't exist. We go inside these buildings at Longwood on fire alarms, people stuck in elevators, EMS calls, and you're not able to talk back. So, fortunate we hadn't had an incident where it's caused somebody to get hurt, but it's very likely. So, greatly supported in your efforts to support this project. Any other questions?
No, I think that's pretty clear. Thank you, sir. And you're saying Mr. Davis, that you and Ms. Moore have looked at this, and it's definitely well within our means to consider.
Yes, I mean, would definitely support us being part of this. I don't know, we don't feel that we have to borrow the money. So that could save the county some in not having to borrow all of the funds if we can pay as we go with that, over a period, so.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Davis or anyone? Yeah.
No, I'm just, like I said, it's long overdue, and to save one life, I think is worth it.
I mean, yeah, I think we all probably feel very much the same way. We're talking about the backbone of our community here. So it's pretty paramount.
So I think the county administrator is looking for a verbal. I can say that he can say that he has a verbal to move forward, and then we'll come back with anything that you need as your financing, correct?
Is everybody feeling good about the thumbs up to the county administrator?
Yes.
Looks like you have that consensus for sure. Thank you. I think we all agree that's pretty important. Speaking of finances, next item on the agenda is the presentation of the FY 2024-2025 projected revenues. Mr. Davis?
You want me to do that? I don't know if I'll be able to work it, but I'll do it. This is the 24-25 projected revenue. This is just a overall highlight. You're not going to see every single line item of numbers. This is to give you an idea, because we're in the budget process now. Actually, department directors had to submit their budgets by the 31st of January. Next week, Julie and I will meet with each department director and sub-manager of a group that falls underneath them to discuss what they've proposed and what we think that we might actually be able to do. Obviously, when we project these revenues, we're only halfway through the fiscal year, and that's every year, I tell you that. But we do feel pretty confident in what we have. As we get further in this month, we'll be more confident, and when we present it to you in March or April, the full budget, we will definitely be confident at that point. Always, we're conservative in some ways, because I would rather be, I'd rather have more money at the end of the year than come back to you and say I don't have enough money, and we're going to be over. So we've got to cut a whole lot. If you just look at our current budget, we are currently budgeting 23.7, which is slightly down from the prior year's originally adopted budget. When I say current, it means the upcoming, the proposed, which was 25. That's due to several factors that I'm going to discuss a little bit further into the presentation. But if you look, obviously the general fund is the largest, and then you have it broken out into the other funds that you see on your regular monthly reports. So currently budgeting 23.7. If you want the whole number, it's 23,759,623, which is slightly down from the prior years, which is 25, I said before. And here's some of the significant shifts. If you look at the street maintenance fund, we have an increase of 338,000, as there is a projected VDOT funding increase to what we get based on our roadways mileage for that. The water fund, we're showing that it's down. Oh, you can't see it because I didn't pop the, see, Mary, that's why. Thank you. You're still looking at a circle graph. Yeah, you're not seeing what I'm seeing, but now you are. The water fund is, We're down 784,000 compared to the prior year. And this is because in '24, we budgeted all the ARPA funding of 1.6 million, not all of the ARPA funding, all of the ARPA funding for the water piece of 1.6 million being spent in FY '24. But that may be coming back at the end of this year because all those projects may not be complete. As you know, we have to then carry it over into into '25. But we're still doing the projects. During FY '24, we have started internally setting aside funds for future capital improvement projects and assets. And so we're recognizing these internally designated in funds in FY '25, which offsets in the amount of $887,000. The sewer fund, it shows down compared to the prior, but again, this is due to the fact of the ARPA funding of $376,000 being spent. And so we're setting aside funds in the CIP of 184. So if you notice, what we're talking about is instead of putting out money and borrowing money, we're trying to keep our money, still make the interest that we're making on it at these different investments, and then pay certain things as we can. Now, granted, at some point, and we need something, we may have to borrow funds again, but I'd like for us over the next few years, pay it all off, pay as we go for this other stuff, and then look at or if we do need to borrow. The transportation fund is down 397,000 compared to FY '24. This is because we had 2 buses that were budgeted, and we're anticipating receiving $244,000 of reimbursement from the state. And we also budgeted $74,000 of prior year funds to be used to cover the difference in revenue and expenses in the transportation fund. The airport, it'll be down 833 compared to the prior year, but that's because we don't have as major of projects, obviously for federal funding, and so we'll have 2 smaller projects in FY '25. Now, if you look at projected versus the original in just general fund, that being the revenues, we're projecting 14.5 in revenues for the general fund versus the prior year, which was originally adopted at 14.3. We are slightly up from the prior year by an amount of 136,000. At 394. So not a lot, but we're being conservative, right? Taxes, the main one that we're projecting an increase will be in business license and meals tax. However, we're going to keep real estate, sales tax, and lodging at pretty much a flat for protection and being conservative. Permits are down by 164. And that is due to, in this projection, we are excluding our ICA per diem that we've received in the past, in that we don't anticipate potentially renewing that contract, that it would not be a revenue source. And then rent and leases are down by 261, and this is due to due to the lease being requested for capital lease purchases. So in the last year, or current year, last year, prior year, whatever you want to call it, it gets confusing when you're still in that year. One of the larger financing pieces of the capital lease was the leaf truck. We won't have that in this coming. One of the other, so that's revenue because we're getting the money in even though we're spending it. Miscellaneous, we have projected this increase 350,000. We have currently not budgeted for any funds to be transferred from other funds. So in the past, we've budgeted like 400 whatever from water, sewer. We're not doing that in this coming year in the general fund. So that transfer is not. That's why you see that not as high.
This be the first year.
Right now, this
Second.
current year, we budgeted it, but we haven't used it. If we finish this year, which we should, will be the first year we haven't used what we transfer. Next year, the upcoming budget, our goal is not to even budget it, much less transfer it. We've also increased our interest income by $277,000 to be more in line with what we're receiving, and factoring in that Julie's been on a conversation with VIP and VGIP, LGIP, VIP, LGIP, ABC, LMNOP, in that they do see that there'll be a potential decline in rates, but not drastically. So we've factored that in. And we've included a CIP set aside of $1 million in FY '25 to cover current and future bond payments. State revenue, we're projected $241,000 higher, and this is due to VDM award of $200,000 for our new equipment and dispatch. Not the radio system, but another piece of equipment that is needed for call volume. And then grants will be down by 185, and this is due to in FY '24, the police department was awarded $217,000 of ARPA law enforcement grant from DCJS, and that was a one-time award. Overall, though, our proposed revenue, as you can see, is going to be higher a little bit. Maybe by the end it'll be more, but we're going to be conservative. So that gives you a little projection into what our revenue we're anticipating. Any questions?
Can I backtrack for just a second, talking about revenues? Can we qualify for any type of grants as far as towards this communication system that we were discussing earlier?
It's through the county because it's their contract, so we cannot. It would be, the grants they're putting in for grants, but that's going to lower the overall cost of the project, which ends up lowering our cost because we're only 20% of it. So they are putting in for grants. That's what he was talking about as far as.
I followed that, but I thought maybe we could grant too.
No.
And so even without the per day ICA money, we're still coming out ahead revenue-wise with your conservative projections.
Yes.
Anybody have any other questions for Mr. Davis on the projected revenues?
Can you go say what the budget was for the last year and then what it's going to be projected for next year again? Because you said 1,000 instead of million.
We're currently budgeting 23 total overall, 23,000,007. I said 23.7. 23.7 million compared to the prior year adopted was 25.2 million.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else all good? All right, looks like we're moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is an update on Phase 1 of the Riverwalk project, speaking of expenses.
So, all the good news, and then I have some bad news. Phase 1.
Why is Julie running out?
She doesn't like bad news. She's done for the evening. Phase 1 was the original scope of the project for the 23-24 TAP application had an estimate of I can break it out for you, but the total was like, it was $1,074,670. And with that, when we got that TAP grants have a 20% match, so we have $214,934. $214,934 to pay. They're now in the, they've moved into the more design phase of this project, VDOT has. And as they've gotten into it, there's been some need for changes to the cost estimates, and there's a variety of reasons that it has increased. And the reason that it has increased is there's some additional hydraulic analysis that needed because the trail is in the floodplain than what was done prior on the preliminary. And granted, that was a preliminary. Due to the historic nature of the area and the waterway, there are some additional environmental and archaeological studies that need to be conducted. There are some additional utility conflicts that were not originally known or accounted for. And the kicker, ADA is expensive. The construction cost due to inflation for the ADA accessible switchback ramp and handrail, the construction costs just for this ramp are estimated to be over $680,000.
That's to come from the sidewalk down into Riverside.
Yes, and so with ADA, you can only have a certain grade before it goes into a landing, and it has to have another grade, a landing. It has to be all concrete, because it's in the floodplain. It has to have metal railings. So that in itself, so the overall estimate that we are a shortfall right now is an additional $408,603. Few choices. We can pay that out of pocket. What's all the laughter for? We can pay that out of pocket. We can apply for an additional TAP grant for that $408,000, which would mean we have another 20% match, which would be $81,721, which would make our overall cost $300 and some thousand. But there's no guarantee that we get that grant. It's likely, but not guaranteed. But if they continue to move forward and we don't get that grant, then we're committed to that $408,000. The other option is we cut our losses at $24,000 that's already been expended in. Not only that, if we decide later, because we don't get the grant, to cut loose, and VDOT spent more money moving forward, then we got to pay more than we do right now for the work that they're doing, that they've done beyond now, if we continue this process and hope for the grant. If we cut now, we only lose $24,000.
This is just phase one.
Correct. This is just phase one.
It's 3 phases, right?
3 phases. So I came to you a few months ago, and the approval to put in for the second phase. Well, we had, and it was tight to the deadline. When we got to the deadline, the TAP funds had capped it, and with the new preliminary, what you had approved was not that amount, and it was more than the grant, $2.5 million. So phase 2 right now, today, is more than cap. The most expensive phase is the third phase that will probably be well over $3 million for that third phase. So the question becomes, do you want to continue with this? And now you don't have to answer me tonight. I do need to know by next week. So think about it. It's a lot of information. But at the end of the day, this could end up being closer to, if you, this could be $8 to $9 million walkway.
$8 to $9 million from us, or total cost, including grants and stuff like that? That's why I'm a little confused.
Total cost.
What would our total cost be
Well, if it's
if nothing changed?
Well, on $1,074,000, it's 214 and some change. So you're talking,
Couple million.
Yeah.
Not including if we had to pay the whole 400,000 because we didn't get that on the
Correct.
ground. So that would be,
and you're talking about this project wouldn't be done until like 2030 something, in 3 phases.
Well, the
You got to
thing-
think that you can only put in for TAP every 2 years, every odd year, and then you don't get funding. You get awarded in 25, but you don't get the money until fiscal year 27, 28. I mean, you have to try to factor that in, but that just food for thought of what you want to do, how you want to move forward. I appreciated Jay Brown with VDOT for actually reaching out to me so that I could, before it went any further, and I mean, they're good about that. They're great to work with. And we can have this discussion before he gets too far down the line that we would be out a lot more than 24,000 of their work.
So you're saying next week would be a good time for you to know how the council feels concerning the future of this project?
Yes.
can you please shoot me at least, and maybe even whoever else may want it, the quick summary of the phases and then the cost for each one, so I can see it visually. I do so much better visual. Or I can come by and see it. Doesn't matter to me.
Well, I mean, I don't have updated costs on the other two.
No,
but
I get that.
They're going to increase,
I get that.
especially the elevated one.
I was gonna say, I think that's the thing to keep in mind is that this is phase one where we're already seeing changes in cost. The cost, I think, for phase two and specifically phase three with that elevated platform is gonna be quite a different cost. And I don't even think in discussing, in my recollection, with that phase three is I'm not even sure it has like, it's not like a traditional river walk where you have then access to the, like, you know, you're coming behind Charlie's, you're coming behind Greenfront. I don't even think it has access to those entities. It's just a pathway. Yeah, it's like a bridge. Yes. So as you think about it, think about like basically what we're considering is a fairly expensive trail.
Thank you. That helps immensely.
So yeah, if anybody has any additional questions for Mr. Davis, feel free. But we also have the week to bandy him with questions, and he'll be more than excited to handle. Yeah, you know, sometimes things happen. Next item on the agenda is discussion on plan unit development ordinance. I don't have much as we roll into this, other than I think Mr. Davis brought this up with the idea of, I think by and large, we have not had any lengthy discussion about the actual ordinance itself. It has often been a conversation predicated on potential of what would happen later with the ordinance. And I think the question at hand is, do we dedicate more time from the staff? Do we dedicate more time of it going to the planning commission to actually be ironed out? Do we look at this tool and think of a way to craft it that would be beneficial to have on our shelf or not. And in that vein, if we want our staff to start that process. And so with that, Mr. Davis, do you have any lead in here?
I'll try to be brief. I sent you all some material the last few days. And some news articles of places. You know, I've mentioned this before of our guiding, for me to do my job and for us to try to make this community grow. And when I mean grow, I don't mean at a warp speed or the size of some large county, but something that can drive economic development better than, in a better way. We all hear that people want a grocery store, they want other things. And you saw tonight, that financial, I could pull it back, I could go backwards. One of our biggest issues, if you look at some of that, is our economy. It's what the median salary, the salary of folks, but also the economy itself here. And some of that is skewed. Don't get me wrong, it's skewed by college students. And I'll get to that in a minute. I do have something to say about that, but the council told staff and told us in this document just last year, a year ago this month, that you wanted us to focus on community and land development, and it was encouraging diverse and affordable housing is one of the things in this, while accommodating growth. To preserve the charm, beauty, and history of Farmville while accommodating growth, encouraging diverse and affordable housing, and promoting an efficient and safe transportation system. And so, you know, we're bringing to the table something that we think can do that, that is a tool. You might never use it if you decide not to. I think I sent y'all something this week or last week where just because you adopt the ordinance for planned unit development, which allows somebody to create a master plan for a parcel of land, doesn't mean that it ends there, because every step of the way, at the end, you get to say whether you approve that or not. That master plan, you have to approve that when it's brought to you. So nothing's being rezoned if you add an ordinance. They have to come to you. They have to come with a plan, a master plan, a site plan. They have to come with you with a rezoning request, all those things. And you have to say yes or no. You know, our population's a little skewed because of the universities. But as Davenport said, that's not a bad thing, because we have a lot of other things because of them here. But our data is a little skewed when you look at the census. It says that our 65 and over population is like 16%. Is 16% of our population. And it says 18 to 24 is, I forget what it is. That's probably really skewed, because they may live here in in the apartments, but they're not here year round. I think that's probably a little bit higher than what that is. I would say, just want to give you a little, part of what we need to be is, I went to the ICMA conference, and I told you I'd bring back, and there was a lady, she's really, her name's Lindsay Pollack, Pollak. And her thing was how to lead and succeed in the multi-generational workplace. But if you look at it from outside the workplace, which we have to, is we should be a multi-generational livable town, not just in the workplace. Right now, there's still some traditionalists, if you look at generations left, they're probably 78 to 95 years old right now. And they make up about 7.6% of the population in the United States. Baby boomers, there's a few of y'all up here, 59 to 77. And you all make up about 21.8% of the population in the United States. Then there's the greatest generation, which is X, and we're 43 to 58. We're 43 to 58.
We're a small generation,
But we're the
man,
smallest. We're at 19.9%.
You're in the minority.
Millennials, which are now Generation Y, that are, everybody keeps saying, well, the millennials getting into, they've been in the workplace, folks. They're 27 to 42 years old. And they make up 22% of the United States. Generation Z, which is 11 to 26 years old, so some of them are already buying homes or renting, they make up 20.3%. The youngest two, well, actually there's another one. There's a new one now too. They had to start over. They're gone to the Generation Alpha because we started so far in the alphabet, they started to go back to the beginning. They're 10 and younger, so you can't really count them right now. But the Y and Z make up a larger portion of the population than the boomers and the Xers. We should be building our communities for what they also desire and what that future will desire, other than just the people that live here now. Our median household income is, by the census, is $39,233. I think that's slightly skewed as well because you have people that aren't counted. They count people that aren't employed. I think it's probably closer to probably 45 or 50-ish, I would imagine. Maybe not that high. And I'm talking about income because we need, when we talk about affordable, it doesn't mean, I think that's been lost in some of these conversations is, it doesn't mean you're a person that doesn't work or you, whatever it may be that people think that means. Because it'd be nice to have people that work in our town live here. A lot of our industry is service workers of some sort. So let's take somebody that's cooking your food at one of these restaurants. Maybe the average they make is $15, $16 an hour. Let's talk about somebody that works at like an oral surgery or a dental office as an assistant. About $16, $17 an hour. That is gross $35,500 a year, let's just say. You're not going to bring home that. It's gross. The median rent in Farmville is $1,000 to $1,200. A person making that money cannot do anything except pay rent. They can't pay the water bill. They can't pay electric bill. They can't buy their groceries, their car insurance. We want them to work here, but how do we get people to live here? And then there's the other side of the spectrum, where we have people that are professionals that don't want to buy a house. Maybe. They want to live in a townhome. They want to live in an apartment complex. And they don't mind having a rent that's $1,600, $1,800 a month. But they want things around them. And I think you can do that if you read the articles that I sent, in that somebody can come with a plan that you can't get by right or conditional use and have commercial, a townhome, a single family home that is on a smaller lot than 1,400 square feet like we have in R1 right now. If we want to bring more people that are 55, we don't have any 55 and over communities like a lot of jurisdictions do, where they come in and they live in a community, has a homeowners association, has their lawns maintained, all of that kind of stuff, instead of what we currently have. I just think we're not looking far enough in advance to at least have an opportunity, have something on the table that we could offer a developer if they wanted to come here and build something like that in Farmville. That's it.
All right. The floor is open. I know that there's been some folks who have had questions. I would for sure poke and prod you to ask them. I know from my perspective, I would like to try and steer us into a conversation around whether or not this tool is something of interest, right? Like, there's been a lot of discussion about what this tool could be used for in the future, particular to one thing or another, and there seems to be a handful of people who have opposition to something that may happen in the future. That's great. We'll have plenty of time to debate that if that time comes. But at the moment, the discussion is the actual tool itself. Like, is it a tool that's viable to have on the shelf? And so, at this point, I mean, we should have an open discussion about people's hesitations about that tool, people's thoughts on it, and try to drive from there. So I would encourage anyone who has anything that they'd like to bring up or questions asked to do so at this time.
I'll make a comment.
Yeah.
I wanted to make just a side note in the fact that I've learned a lot in the last 2 months with some of the information that we've been given. I really was kind of leaning towards the possibility of seeing if we couldn't address this with zoning versus this PUD ordinance. But in hindsight, after seeing this and reading this, I don't think zoning is an option, simply for the fact we don't, it would be by right if we decided to try to address it with zoning, whereas with the PUD ordinance itself, we get a thumbs up or a thumbs down regardless. If we decide to use it as a tool, when we get to that point, if somebody applies for that, we have total control over what we say does or does not happen. To me personally, I like that aspect of being able to say yes or no with not having a by right, say, from using zoning. And that's just kind of a summation of what I've learned in the last couple of months by reading and trying to understand this better. Good or bad, I'm not real sure, but I do think that it does give us a lot more control over the possibility if we decide to pursue it. Just a comment.
I've got a question just back to Scott, please. At what phase is it too late to say, okay, they present a master plan? Is that the phase where council at that point, and you would have public hearings at that point? That's the point that you would say this is not the development that we would like? Is that where the shutdown comes if it's not appropriate, or is it later than that, or does that question make sense?
It would depend on how you draft the ordinance. At what phase do you want to tell them yes or no? You know, do you want, staff will know some things in the beginning, like, you know, there'll be some set parameters, obviously, but you have the ability to say that, no, we want more sidewalks, we want whatever. I mean, you can come up with, the thing I sent y'all today of Hamlet at Falling Creek, granted, that's huge subdivision, master plan. Chesterfield has a really good website of tracking. There's 39 things that they have to meet in that master plan that they have asked for. So you can go through that and look at the project as a whole and say, is that what you want? Does it fit there?
So what you're saying, it depends on how we set it up, will determine what phase we can shut it down.
Yeah, that's part of the thing with, from my estimation, is like we haven't even gotten to the point of like saying what's the minimum acreage. You know what I mean? Like we haven't even gotten to get into the bones of the thing itself because we kind of got waylaid. But yeah, you could set the parameters, right? Like how much green space, how much sidewalk contribution, how much acreage is the minimum, all of those settings. And then somebody presents a master plan to the administration here, the staff, and then it goes to planning commission.
Well, we'll sit down and talk to them about what it looks like,
yeah,
and what they're meeting, what they're not meeting, and then it's just like those slides I sent y'all, the refreshers or whatever that I sent you. I mean, if you looked at any of those ordinances, I mean, I sent y'all like over a dozen, I think, ordinances that exist. You can see what it looks like as far as how they're written, and we can make, once we decide if that's what you want to get to, we can make it look how you want that ordinance to look for the process. In order to qualify. Yeah.
But even then, you could say no.
Right.
We'll be in control.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's interesting is some of the opposition that has come to this. It's like there are certain planners who view it as like, you know, PUD has the potential to have like political gatekeeping possibilities, right? Like, because you could say no to things just because there's like one particular thing or person you don't like. You know what I mean? Like that it gives you so much control that it's almost like a gatekeeper thing. So it's like it could actually do the very thing that those people who are against it want to do, which is interesting, and ironic. Yeah, like it gives such control. Like if you go back and look, I went back and looked at some interactions that happened between the Charlottesville City Council and a developer who presented a master plan. And there was a lot of back and forth dialogue, like as they whittled down to getting to an agreeable point of what met their needs. Yeah, the tool itself, like if you just take the tool out and look at the tool and go, is this something we want to put on our shelf? I don't know, what, there are other things other tools we could eventually adopt as well, and you just put them on the shelf. And then as we need them or want to use them, you pull them down and use them. But in itself, this thing doesn't present an evil. It's just like any tool. If you misuse it, well, then you have issues, right? Like if you liberally spray PUD ordinances across your district or across your town, probably a con, not great, right? But if you take your time to craft one and then debate the merits of master plans that are presented, you're probably using it sparingly.
We also get to review what the Planning Commission comes up with as well, because we're just in the infancy of this. So therefore, there's going to be quite a bit of dialogue back and forth between them and us if we decide to pursue it, because we want to get it to where we want it before we adopt it, if that's where we go.
Correct. That's my assessment as well, yes.
I'll go ahead if y'all don't mind. Is PUD my biggest concern is not just, I don't really care what we use. I just want us to have the best tool. And is PUD the only tool? Is it the best tool? Can we see what other options there are? Can we do, I've done some stuff and I looked at plan development overlays, which is similar but used for when the lay of the land is not as nice, let's say, not as flat and easy to develop. Maybe even some sort of a hybrid between our zoning and stuff. And when we talk about an easier path to yes, and do we want to just keep throwing tools in the toolbox? Let's figure out what the best tool is, get that going, and then we can use that, which will solve many problems. And then if we need to adjust later, we're trying to look at the long-term processes here, not just 3 or 5 years down the road, but where do we want to see this town in 20, 30, 50, 100 years, and stuff like that, or what's going to be where, and, expansion, and, I don't know what the rules are on expanding the size of the town and taking over, I don't know. I don't know all that stuff. But, changing some things in our current zoning, it is stuff that is conditional, and there are things that are by right, but it's very different in each zone that we have, and there are some zones that are very wide open for business and also for residential use, which could be mixed use at the same time. Now, they are conditional, and that's where we would also have that control over what would be in that space for those spaces. That's just kind of where I come from, is I want to see us use the best tool for the job. That's, Brian sent us something the other day, and I loved it. It was, think about what the end game is first and write it backward from there. And our end game obviously is to grow and be better economically and create a better place for everybody to be and live. And you read it. I can't remember. I don't have it in front of me. But how do we get there from here in the long term, not just, okay, let's stick a tool in to have and use. Let's figure out what is best. And a lot of these things, people are saying, you know, hey, we are using a tool because we're putting a tool in our ordinances because somebody needs it. And so they start talking about those things, and that's one of the options. Another one is, like you said, just to have it. But me personally, I don't want to see us have a PUD on the shelf and a plan unit development overlay or a plan development overlay and some sort of hybrid and something else, and then everybody's looking at it going, what in the world are we going to use here? And they got to filter through all of that stuff to try to figure out what the best use for their project or what they want to do is. Let's figure out what the best tool is and take it from there. So that's kind of where I am. I have a lot of stuff I could have gone through, but I'm not gonna.
I have a comment. I feel like the discussions on the plan unit development ordinance, when it first came up, it was at the same time that we were talking about this certain housing project. And I think that if we took that housing development project out of the way, that this plan unit development ordinance would have just went smoothly on through. I think that this project would have just ordinance would have gone right on through. I think that it was just a negative vibe with this housing project. And this PUD just got tied up in all of it. And that's sad.
The key is, if that ever were to come to fruition,
We have
you can
control.
say
We have
no.
control. I mean, that's the thing now. I'm seeing we have total control of this now. And this is coming forth. This is so silly. This is very silly that we've wasted all this time now. So that's my 2 cents.
I mean, we've been doing this for over a year. And I guess the way I look at it is if we wanted to look at more ordinances or anything else, it should have been brought up 3, 6, 9 months ago. Why are we at the 11th hour when we got all this information that we received now trying to push back? We already have the tool in front of us that we can control from A to Z. We're not missing any letters on it. So I think we need to explore it more and see what we can do to make it fit the town of Farmville, the entire town, not different sections.
Here's another thing. I was riding through Chesterfield today, and riding through some of these, I guess, PUD type developments, and with the townhouses and the shops. And I thought about Farmville. And if you haven't had the opportunity, you need to listen to Brian's podcast that he did with, I don't know who the lady was, but it's over an hour long, and it talks about the town of Farmville, and it talks about all the things that we offer, from all the recreation to all of the downtown shopping to even in the county, to the restaurants, and it is magnificent, and we have so much to offer. And I was thinking about the PUD, and I was thinking that we don't have senior housing, and we don't have affordable housing, and we don't have first-time home buyer. We don't have affordable housing. My daughter is a RN, and her fiance don't have the opportunity to buy a $200,000 home here in town. And so and that's, I mean, that's kind of sad. I mean, I'd love to have the opportunity for a developer to come to Farmville and to build something as magnificent as what is in Chesterfield that I saw and drove by today. So if you get a chance, listen to Brian's podcast and how magnificent Farmville is encapsulated in this 1-hour podcast, and it will give you the charge to get behind Farmville and to get behind us on developing and just doing good things in Farmville. I'm telling you.
I appreciate
I think
that
it goes
shout
back
out.
to while we don't have doctors and teachers and professionals living here, they got to travel 60 and 80 miles just to get to work here.
Yeah, we recently rezoned something for Mr. Harper from R1 to R2. And I voted for that. I think it was a good idea because I think what he's proposing is good. But, however, we have no control over what they really do there. We can't control the green space. We can't control anything really because he's just restricted by whatever the zoning has. So, I mean, I'm just saying as a point of comparison, if we want more control about what a project's going to look like, we're going to have to put something else in place to allow that. Otherwise, and I've also, like Mr. Parrott, I've thought about can we readapt the zoning? But the problem with that is we're not going to have the control that we might want. Correct me if I'm wrong in that.
And you're not going to want to do it for every single thing. You're going to want this to be, I mean, if you look at what we have the availability for, you're probably going to set a minimum of, in order to do this, you got to have 3 to 5 acres to do something like this. Because you want this to be maybe it's smaller, maybe it's 2, I don't know. But you want to be able to plan out those different aspects of a community. And that's really what they're building when they do that, is a community within the community.
I will say, regarding like the zoning conversation, and I hear what Mr. Hardy is saying, and I guess I would say I don't think that putting a PUD ordinance into the books precludes an exploration of anything else at all. I mean, I think that this body, as evident by the way we project forward and we craft strategic visions for the town, like we are going to naturally, consistently look for ways to get to where we want to get to. And there are going to be plenty of ample opportunities as we move forward to do so. But I don't know that like anything precludes us from adopting things as we roll and then using them at our discretion or using them at the discretion of the council. I appreciate that was Virginia Outdoor Adventures podcast, which was great. The young lady who runs that podcast highlights outdoor adventures in the Commonwealth and received grant money from Virginia Tourism to highlight adventure towns in Virginia, and we were chosen as one of those adventure towns. And so it was absolutely an honor to sit with her, and as I told her, one of the perks of being mayor, one of my favorite parts of the mayoral duties is just basically being a cheerleader for Farmville. I mean, that's the most fun part. For sure, and so I appreciate that. Thank you.
And you do a good job at that, by the way. So, but and one of the other things, and I will bring up one more thing, and I know I can obviously see where this is going, but I really would like for us to also look at our current zoning, and I have literally read the zoning, and stuff is not as easy to read for people. I mean, like, what is the density of R1, I can kind of figure it out based on, and I'm just using this as an example, units per acre, it's okay, it's 14,000 square feet, it's 42,000 some odd square feet in an acre, so therefore about 3. And R2 is based on those things about 5.5 units per acre. R3, it's defined in that chart in the zoning at 16 units an acre, and then R4, which is the mobile homes, which I know we don't have much of that, but it is defined in this chart and in the zoning at 8 units per acre. And then you jump into the B1 through B3, and there is residential allowed in some of those, and much more in B2 than transitional commercial than it is anywhere else. But it's not truly defined in our zoning, and that kind of leads to confusion and interpretation and stuff like that. And if it is there, please, good gosh, somebody show me, because I can't find it, and I've read it from one end to the other looking until my eyes start rolling back. But, you know, this is where I'm coming from on that, on all of it is that is another easier path to yes, too, is to make it where people can read it. And one of the things I was reading also is if we are looking at this, that we need to make sure that we have a lot of our standards I found a couple of things that are not left for interpretation. You don't say about or could be or should be. It is, and stuff like that. And I know that's up to y'all, but just a lot of the things. But, you know, our zoning, I would love to see it be a little easier to follow. I've got somebody that's got an issue that's one of my clients that has an issue with a sign, and they're like, I can't find where what it is, because it's a sign that's been there a while. And that's just, you know, it's not necessarily well defined in some places for me. And that's neither here nor there, but I just wanted to get that out.
So what are you asking for us here? You want permission to go forward with creating a PUD, planned or unit development. And do you want any input from us? Are we going to create this together, or is this something you're going to take back to the staff and the Planning Commission and put all the dots and crosses on the T's and the I's? What do you need from us?
Yeah, Mr. Yolen, I actually appreciate that question, because it is exactly what that's what I wanted is I need a definitive, yes, we are going to truly consider a planned unit development, that staff doesn't go and spend all this time getting feedback from you all, feedback from the Planning Commission, drafting something to just say, no, we don't want this to begin with. So, I mean, I truly, the point is we've kicked it around, and do you want to truly see what it would look like? And you've seen what they can look like, obviously, but yeah, if you say we're going to move forward in truly looking at this with a clear eye, then we will ask you some of the basics at first. We'll have another work session in March and say, what do you think? We'll lay it out of these different things that are in a lot of them. And that's what I have asked y'all also in an email. I've said, let us know, what do you like? Which ones do you like? Which parts do you like of these ordinances that we've provided already to you? What are the areas that you like the most? And then we'll filter that down, because there's no sense in just letting the Planning Commission go blind and say, well, we like this and it gets here, and you don't like you like one thing about it. But if they get some idea of what you're looking for as an end result, it helps everybody's process.
I'm assuming we can talk back and forth as this proceeds to where, you know, we don't get so deep to where we go, oh no, we don't want to do this. If we do it baby steps at a time and they talk to us, we talk to them, then we can have a consensus before we go too far to where we just don't blow it up.
You can have joint meetings if you want.
That wouldn't be a bad idea to do regularly anyway. Kind of like our county town, even if it's twice a year or something, or if big stuff is coming up, just plan on something like that. That'd be kind of cool, because I'd learn more.
Everybody like the sound of moving forward with development and of an ordinance in which there will be, I like the idea of having some planning commission council meetings. That'd be great.
We can
Yeah.
have some work sessions. We did
Yeah.
when we did the comp plan and
Yep.
when we did the zoning ordinance changes the last time.
Yep. Sounds like a plan. Everybody, how we feeling? We good with that plan as we look at this? We'll start putting it on the radar for us to discuss. We'll plan for some joint planning commission council meetings about the ordinance itself and start digging into the meat of it.
As long as we get again, bring stuff to the table, ideas that we like to see in something, and something that holds the people who are developing accountable to a degree. I don't want to make it more difficult to say yes, but I am looking at 3 different developments we've got in town that have been approved and have not had ground broken on them. Big ones.
Know
Right.
of one that I think is getting ready to be.
Who's that?
I think the one, oh gosh, I can never remember. Andrews, Parkview, Vernon? I think that one that's my understanding, they're gonna start that one soon. Is that the one you're referring to? Yeah, I hope so. That'll be great. But other than that, there are a couple of more that haven't been touched, and that's, obviously, the one that just got approved hasn't been, but that's just been approved, so
Hypothetically,
it's a lot of units.
if we've got ourselves a PUD and we go ahead through the whole process and give people permission to it, can we put a sunset clause or something into the PUD if they don't break ground in 4 years, 10 years, something like that, that it reverts back to its original zone? How complex can we get with this thing without scaring people off?
That'd be a great discussion. Ask your attorney when he's here.
Where'd the attorney go?
I can tell you exactly where he is.
That is definitely something that I'm concerned about, is the accountability and the cost that's associated, that comes with the town. I want to look at ideas that, if we put 400 new heads in this town, what's that going to do to our emergency services? Are we going to need to hire more police officers? What about the impact on our emergency rooms, social services, and things like that? Can we delve into that with this kind of planned unit development?
I think if you're asking like about an economic impact report for developments, I think that's not even specific to this ordinance. That could be something you desire for any development.
We could tie it to the
But
development, couldn't we?
I guess I think the thing that and I don't know, but from what I've reading and listening I've done, that there's probably some inevitable grayness, right, in the assumptions you would make about the people who would occupy those residences, how much they would contribute to the local economy via dining, shopping, various things of that nature. You could definitely say this is how much it costs to educate a child, those sort of things. We know that sort of information, but getting into the nuances of it, I think there are mechanisms and parameters you can get to, but I'm not sure you can get to all of them, I guess is what I'm saying.
But we can have a conversation about what we can get to. Little things like adding a new fab line, or hiring a new police officer, or what the tap costs are going to be or associated with it. For instance, I brought this up to y'all before, I think we need more sidewalks. I think that if we're going to develop a plot of land or something, we ought to make it walkable, again, for all these different generations you're talking about. we've started building neighborhoods without sidewalks. I don't think that's the right direction we need to be going. So, and Brian, you sent me something earlier. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, you sent me something earlier about canopy and trees. These things don't plant themselves. We need to take care of them, and this is for, again, the future generations that are coming down. So if you want to go forward this, I support the idea of delving into this, but let's make it the best tool that we can grow with, and that we understand the ramifications of our decisions going forward.
Yeah, in most of those developments that this would be tied to, you're gonna require them to have sidewalks.
Good thing.
Green space. I mean, you're gonna make it like I said, a community within itself.
Walkable, sociable community. Green spaces, common places, fab bus stops that are covered, keep people out of the rain.
But you can't require that just by rezoning something from R1 to R2, as an example. I'm with you. That's the control that we'd be seeking.
I would love to see $200,000 homes for, Sally, for your daughter and her fiance. The more I talk to contractors, those kinds of homes, they don't exist. You can't, it's hard. And hopefully, maybe there's an option, but they just, houses, and this is talking to several contractors, and houses that were $140,000, $150,000 6 years ago are $275,000 to $300,000 now. It is insane. So hopefully, if this goes and works and we can get it to do, maybe they'll have an option for something that's more reasonable. Unfortunately, when I was in my 20s, I couldn't buy a house. I had to have a roommate, and that's not always the most favorable option, but sometimes it's the only option. So,
One last thing. I just want to make an observation. I'm a big believer in the free market. I hope many people are. Across the street from me in Ward B, we had all those new developments put up for the college students, and they started out with outrageous prices. Fully furnished, internet provided, electric, everything, really beautifully. Those have come down significantly in price in the last couple of years, partly because of Longwood's decision to keep the students on basis. But again, this is a free market working. This is, people can't afford what's out there, and some people are making wise decisions and saying it's better to get something than nothing, and they are lowering their prices. So keep that in mind going forward too, please.
Hope that trend continues.
All right, do we have any other discussion on this matter at this time? Well, I would like to say that I appreciate everybody bringing their thoughts to the table. Thank you. I truly am appreciative. With that, we'll move to the town manager's report. Mr. Davis, what do you have for us?
I'll do it all next week.
All right, comments by council members. Mr. Hardy?
Not a whole lot. I did want to bring up, I am doing some more checking, but it looks like something that popped up. I know it's not what's happening in Farmville, what's actually happening. That one's a better one to follow. Seems like the county school, they need a new sousaphone, and I don't know who is out there listening right now. We've been here a while, but I'm challenging everybody to donate. I'm giving $100 myself. I'm not challenging anybody to do that, but I got $100 right here that's going to the new sousaphone. I'm a band geek, and I marched in band, and I want to support them. So that's all I got.
How much is the sousaphone?
$9,000, and it's being held together by duct tape.
Mr. Hunter?
I just have one question. Oh, no, I'll just wait till next week. We'll go with this from the General Assembly.
Mr. Yellen?
What is a sousaphone? What's a sousaphone? What is a sousaphone?
Sousaphone? Well, it's like
What's
a
a sou-
tuba. You know.
Like a French horn?
No, much bigger. Much bigger.
Thank you. I'll put $100 into that. I don't have anything. Thank you for your time tonight, everybody.
Mr. Parrott?
I'm good, I've talked enough.
Mr. Dwyer?
Nothing.
Mr. Reed?
No, I don't have anything.
Mrs. Amos?
Jake, is North Street back in business?
Not yet. All right. The only thing I've got is just to let y'all know, Mary and I have started working together on a system by which, we don't really have a system set up for people to like request proclamations from the mayor. And so in an effort to try and formalize that, we also started looking at ways that we could just do recognitions that weren't proclamations, but just recognizing members of the community for doing good deeds or great accomplishments. And so we've started crafting a template for that as well. And so with the council's blessing, I would continue to move forward on a template for recognizing some of our community members for their contributions to the community, just as a way to consistently, once again, champion our champions that we have in the community. But I just want to let y'all know that that was in the works and make sure it was all good. And the only other thing I have, just quickly, although it doesn't, I hesitate to bring it up as we're at 8:30, 8:35, but last meeting we discussed the merits of moving our normal council meetings to the same time as our work session. Currently, our council meetings start at 7, our work sessions start at 6. Now, we could not do that for next week, naturally, but moving forward, I was curious if there was an appetite from council to move those meetings up an hour. I think, one, it would save staff from sitting for 2 hours and narrow that down to an hour. But we also might get increased engagement from the public. I don't know. Thoughts?
I'm in agreement with it.
I like it. Yeah, people may stay around and come right after work, and instead of going home and eating supper and getting on the couch.
Are you all right with that? All right. And yes, Mr. Reed is on the cover of the VML magazine. He is here to autograph your copy. And welcome that, Mr. Presidente. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor? Those opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. It's Jackie Vaughn's birthday.